It's episode 562 of the Locked On Texas Rangers podcast. On today's show, I'm talking about Martin Perez's latest start, same with Spencer Howard and what it means for their spots in the rotation. Also, I'm previewing the outfield, what to expect from the starters, from the bench, and what it's going to look like at the end of the year, and if that's different from what it is right now. All that and more on today's episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On the Texas Rangers. I'm your host, Bryce Paddock. Here today on today's show, I'm going to be breaking down what the Rangers rotation is going to look like, what to expect from the outfield. But first, thank you guys so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, go ahead and follow me on Twitter at Bryce Paddock, follow the show at Locked On Rangers, and subscribe on YouTube. We are inching closer and closer. We're pretty close to the 700 subscribers by opening day. We are about 10 away, I think. So thank you guys so much for doing that. But yeah, this is going to be a great show today, and there's a lot to get into. But first, I want to start off with the last couple of games. I mean, it's spring training games, the last couple of games. There's not always a whole lot you can get into. One thing that I have been mildly disappointed in, not at all concerned, is that Semien and Seager have gone ice cold. Seager started off red hot and was absolutely mashing his first couple of games in a Rangers uniform, albeit that kind of weird logoed spring training uniform. I agree with the White Sox broadcast. If you were watching the game yesterday on MLB TV, the White Sox broadcast was also trashing on the Rangers logo choice for spring training, which they have stuck with for several years, and he was very diplomatic about it, but I won't be. The stupid TX inside of the state, which does not fit inside of the state. It also looks stupid. There's not a TX anywhere. It's not a postcard stamp. You're not doing the mailing abbreviation for the state. Like, stop doing that. Stop trying to make fetch happen, because it's not going to happen. It doesn't look good. You've tried it for like 3 years now. They even have it on their red cap, which they sullied the red cap with that stupid TX logo. And I wish they would just abandon it altogether, because it's really about time. But anyway, I was supposed to be talking about the starting pitching the last couple of games for the Rangers. And Spencer Howard had another really solid outing. He scattered a few hits around, but it wasn't any really hard contact. Actually, the hardest hit contact was hit, right at Marcus Semien, who's been playing some really good defense the last couple of days. Chris Woodward was raving about his defense and how in his first year switching to a primary second baseman, he won a Gold Glove. So if he's already the best in the American League in year one at doing it, imagine how much better he's going to be in year two, now that he's got 162 games under his belt. Well, I guess he didn't play all 162 at second base, but however many, 162 of a season as primarily a second baseman. I really like the plays that he was making against Chicago yesterday. It was a lot of really, really impressive plays. But Spencer Howard, again, looked like a different pitcher than he was last year. He has the confidence. He was getting stretched out a little bit. He threw, I think, around 50-ish pitches, which was about the plan. He went 3 innings, struck out 3, scattered 5 hits, but didn't walk anybody, and looked really in command of his stuff. He's got a 1.80 ERA and I believe now 5 or 6 spring training innings. He's looked solid. The stuff looks good. The fastball is getting on guys really quickly, and they are not adjusting to it very well. He's using the slider and the curveball well as the changeup. He just looks like a different guy, and that is extremely encouraging for the Rangers, because the Rangers might want to have him a little higher in the rotation than the 5 spot, mainly just for the opening weekend. I think eventually he's going to be in that 5 slot in this rotation. And Martin Perez also looks solid in his first A game of big league work in spring training. He had pitched a little bit on the backfields. I listened to the Diamond Pod with Through the Ticket with Sean Bass and tepid participation and Scott Lucas, of course. And he said Tepid was there at spring training and said that Martin Perez, like always when he was a big leaguer with the Rangers, loved going to the backfields and talking to some of those guys, because he grew up on those backfields. He grew up as one of those prospects, and he's made his big league debut with the Rangers, and so he had pitched a little bit there, was talking to the guys, and that's really encouraging to see. He said he could kind of tell that it meant a lot for him to be back, and it wasn't just lip service. So that was encouraging. But he went against this very, very tough White Sox lineup that is just stacked with guys, and he was facing them at the top of the game, so it was all the A guys in there. You had Tim Anderson, Luis Robert, Jose Abreu, Yasmani Grandal, Eloy Jimenez, Yohan Moncada is like the number 7 guy. It's just, this lineup is ridiculous. They've also got Josh Harrison, I believe, hitting 8th in this game. No, yeah, 8th. And also former Ranger great. And also somehow the longest tenured Chicago White Sox player, Larry Garcia. That still gets me. But he looks solid. 3 innings of work. He was trusting his stuff. He didn't get a single strikeout, but he got some swings and misses on his stuff. He added a cutter in Minnesota, so that's new to his repertoire, but he's looked a lot better. He trusts the stuff. He's always been a big ground ball guy. Coming up, you thought there'd be more strikeout stuff with the kind of the stuff that he displayed, but he allowed a few runners. And one of the things that always bothered me about Martin Perez, one of his biggest problems with the Rangers, is that he would let one bad inning rattle him. He'd be absolutely cruising for the first 3 innings and then gets a couple runners, either a bad defensive play or just an unlucky bloop or whatever, and it would kind of get to him and things would just spiral out of control. And he looks like he's matured a little bit. He talked about that to the media when he was coming back, that he feels like he's a more mature player. Pitching out of the bullpen for Boston down the stretch last year was not what he wanted to do. He thought he was a starter. He thought he'd earned his time as a starter. He's not going to be put into a bullpen role for the Rangers this year, unless a lot of things go really, really well, which I don't want to say that I'm hoping that doesn't happen, but it also means that things haven't gone really well for this lefty Martin Perez, which, lefties always take a little while to mature anyway. So maybe this is the time where he's finally finding his stride. But he looked good. He looked solid in there, inducing some weak contact, not allowing any super hard hits, didn't allow any home runs from this absolutely dominant, mostly right-handed heavy lineup. And that's another thing that I think he might be, or another reason why he might be put down a little bit further in the order, maybe a 3 in this rotation to start. Maybe the Rangers go righty right off the top because they are facing what I'd say is the best lineup in baseball. Sorry, Dodgers, but I think this Blue Jays lineup is going to be the best in baseball this year. I mean, Vladimir Guerrero is significantly better. Junior is significantly better than anybody who is in the Dodgers lineup at this point. Do not at me. Sorry, Cody Bellinger. I have no idea what that guy's going to be. If he's anywhere near his MVP self, then maybe I'll change my mind, but I don't think he's going to get there. But they just got Matt Chapman. They also have Bo Bichette. They have just an entirely loaded team. Even when they lost Marcus Semien, they just added another former Oakland A who is absolutely dominant at third base, and they're going to be just fine. They're going to be a really, really good team. So I think he might end up going third. Also, to kind of space out the innings eaters, he might not go right after Jon Gray, even though he's probably going to end up being the second best starter on the Rangers team this year. The thought is maybe you don't pitch those guys in back-to-back games so that if you do have your other guys in the rotation like Dunning, which I don't worry as much about him, not going at least 5 innings, but a little bit more about maybe Taylor Hearn, who is stretched out and did pitch 100 innings last year, but he hasn't had the full season of being a starter in at least since I believe 2018 was the last time that he was a full starter for full season. So it's been a while for him too, and Spencer Howard is, again, still trying to get stretched out and does look really good, and I think that he might end up being able to go about 4 innings by the first time through the rotation. It might take him a while to get 5, and if he gets 6 in like 3 starts this year, if he goes 6 innings and is still in there, that would be very nice. But he hasn't had a long history of doing that, so I think maybe Martin Perez as the number 3 in this rotation might make a little more sense because you trust him to go 5-6 innings consistently, just like you do Jon Gray, and so you're not taxing your bullpen on back-to-back days, so you can give some of those multi-inning guys a day off, which would be excellent and absolutely necessary. But coming up, I'm going to get into what I expect from this Rangers outfield, all 5, maybe even 6. I might even get into a little bit of Leody Taveras, what I expect from these guys, what is the bare minimum, and what I think they are going to do. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. That's right, it's BetOnline. It's the best place to bet on all of your favorite sports. They've got some baseball things that are coming out, some baseball odds. Their main ones are just related to Corey Seager and Marcus Semien, which, fine. I wish they would have given me some over-unders and stuff on Jon Gray or Martin Perez, but that's fine. I understand. But I am glad that they didn't snub 2 of the best middle infielders in all of baseball in Corey Seager and Marcus Semien. But if you want to make your bets, they've got Corey Seager home runs this year. They got an over-under set at 23.5. I think that's pretty low. I think I would definitely... I don't know. Actually, that is a pretty good line. It all depends on his health. If he's healthy for if he plays 150 games, I think he's over that. I think he hits 25, maybe even 30 home runs this year because he's got that absolute line drive power to all fields, and he loves hitting at Globe Life Field. I mean, before Joey Gallo broke his record this year, he was the all-time leader at Globe Life Field in home runs, even though he was an opposing player. It's kind of crazy. Marcus Semien, they have his home runs over under at 29.5 this year. He had 44 last year. Is he going to be able to do more this year? I think so. Well, I don't know about more than 40, 44 or 45, whatever it was last year in the 40s, but I don't think he's going to drop off 15 home runs or whatever it is and go with the under. I think that's a little low. Granted, I think he's had one more 30 plus home run season. So maybe it is a tenuous bet. I don't know, but he's a guy who's got a lot of power and he is really finding his stride. Yeah, it was 45 home runs last year. He had 33 in 2019. So this would be his third 30 plus home run season if you take the over on that. Anyway, go to betonline.net, best place to bet on all your favorite sports. Bet online, where the game starts. Now let's get into some of these projections. Obviously, we have some pretty defined starters at this point in the season. I'm kind of hoping that they change by the end of the season because that means one of two things. One, it means either A, they stunk, which is not great. Any of these entrenched starters, it means that they stunk. They've not hit these bare minimums that probably the Rangers said that might be different than my counting stats or whatever bars I'm going to be setting for them. Or it means that a couple of prospects or one prospect has absolutely dominated and necessitated a starting spot on the big league club by the end of the year. And I'm really hoping that that's more the case than it is these guys suck. But at all these positions, all three of the starters, well, I guess four if you're going to count a platoon, none of these guys we're sure are long-term solutions, and it's looking like most of them aren't. Adoles Garcia is the only one who I think might be even here on this roster in 3 years. Brad Miller has a 2-year deal. He is going to be platooning with Nick Solak in left field. You got Adoles Garcia in center field and Kole Calhoun in right field. Eli White, I think, is probably going to be on the roster for several years because he has such value, but I don't think he is going to be a starter unless some of the stuff that he's been doing in spring training, which has been pretty impressive, and apparently he has revamped his swing, unless that really takes hold, then I don't think he is going to be a starter on this team anytime in the next 3 years. But anyway, let's get into it. Brad Miller. He is here to be a guy who plays some defense at some positions at some level, but he's really just here to mash righties. And there are a lot of righties in baseball. It's mostly righties. So I expect him to have somewhere around, 120 games-ish. He's been around a little bit above that the last couple of years. He's been a primary, I believe, third baseman last year. He's been a primary starter. He's going to be a pretty much platoon-only guy at this point for the Rangers. He is just going to hit righties because that's what he does really, really well in his career. I mean, he's got very, very different splits. Last year, he had 297 plate appearances against righties. He had an 842 OPS. Love to see that. But his OPS against lefties was horrendous, 538. I don't want to see him hitting against lefties. That's not what he's here for. In those just under 300 plate appearances, he had 3 triples, 8 doubles, 16 home runs, an on-base percentage of .350. So I think he needs to have at least a bare minimum of 325 of his on-base. For his career, it looks a little aggressive because his career on-base percentage is .317. His career batting average is .239. But again, that's being weighed down quite a bit by lefties. Last year's batting average against righties was .244, and his batting average against lefties was .169. His on base was .200 against lefties. Like, that was really, really bringing his numbers down. So I think that those numbers are going to be way up and going to be really nice for the Rangers. So I'm hoping that he has a bare minimum of 300 on base percentage. I'm hoping that he has a bare minimum of 10 home runs. I think he's going to get in around 120, maybe 130 games, depending on if he plays a little bit at third base. But I don't think he's going to play that much at third base because, first off, his defense is very bad at third base. He is pretty much just a first base, left field, DH kind of guy. But I don't know that his bat is necessarily going to be better than Willie Calhoun's. I'm hoping that it's not. I'm really hoping that it's not because that means that Willie Calhoun is healthy and hitting well. And it's probably not going to be better than Nathaniel Lowe, who I'm hoping is going to take a big step forward in learning how to hit fastballs this year and learning to swing and use that prodigious power that he's got in his bank. So yeah, that's about what I'm hoping for. If he can get 15 to 20 home runs, that would be great. Last year he had 20 home runs. And, I think it'd be good. But some of the expectations for him, the projections according to Baseball Perspective or Baseball Reference, sorry, not Baseball Prospectus, they have his on base at 321, it's slugging 444, 20 home runs, 15 doubles, 3 triples, and a partridge and a pear tree. Yeah, I'd be happy with that. That'd be really solid. 435 plate appearances at a 32-year-old at age 32. I think that'd be great. He's also got a 2-year deal. He's making a little bit more than Kole Calhoun, which kind of surprised me. And he's got a guaranteed second year, which Kole Calhoun does not. He's making $6 million this year, $4 million next year. No club or player options. So I'm a little surprised that they gave him that much money, but he did have a really, really good season for the Phillies last year. And if they know exactly how they're going to use them, the Rangers have been really bad about actually committing to platoons in the past. And I really want them to actually stick with this because he has been horrendous against lefties the last couple of years. And for his career, he's been straight up bad. So I think if they just let him do this and let him thrive in this situation where he mashes righties, that's what he does, let him do that, then I think he'll be great. I think he'll be well worth the $6 million that the Rangers paid him to do. They don't have to worry about his defense because you have Adoles Garcia, who I think makes up for it with his speed and his ability as a defender in center field that I don't think is that much of a drop-off from Leody Taveras, who is probably the best defensive center fielder in baseball when he's actually up and not hitting with a pool noodle, which is going to be a topic for later on in this podcast. But coming up, I'm going to talk about Nick Solak, what I'm expecting from him, Adoles Garcia, Kole Calhoun. These are some really difficult guys to get a bar for what the Rangers expect for them, but I'm going to try and get my handle on that as best I can. So let's look at Nick Solak, who's the guy who he really needs, this is a huge season for him. Last year was a huge season for him too, and he fell flat on his face. 2020 was a big season as well. He took over the second base job. The Rangers got rid of Rugi. Actually, was that last year? It was last year that the Rangers got rid of Rugi. But in 2020, he basically replaced him in everything but name as the starter. Rugi spent a lot of time not playing in the shortened season. Last year, it was Nick Solak's time to shine, and Nick Solak did not come to shine. It was just not a great season for him at all. They sent him back down to AAA, called him back up. Still had an OPS below 700 for a guy who was not horrendous in center field, but that's obviously not his defensive position. Was fine in left field, nothing crazy, and below average to meh at second base. He doesn't have a lot of defensive value. And if he's not hitting, then he's not a big leaguer. And that is a big question for him. Now, some of the projections for him, I think, are a little off, in my opinion, because it looks like Baseball Reference is projecting him as a starter. They're giving him 518 plate appearances. I don't think he gets that. I really don't. I think he's going to be, only hitting against lefties and pretty much just playing left field because his bat is well below Andy Ibanez. He's worse than him defensively at third base. Maybe if Ibanez gets hurt, they'll play him a little bit at third base, but that's a scenario that you're really not hoping for. And I might, I don't know that I would, but it's close that I might want to have Yanni Hernandez there at third base rather than Nick Solak at this point, which is really saying something because Yanni Hernandez really does not provide much offensive value at all besides getting on base and being a pass on the base pass. But this is a huge year for him. I'm expecting him to get maybe 75-ish games. Maybe he'll play a little bit of right field to spell Kole Calhoun, who also isn't super great against hitting against lefties. But again, this is a big year for him. I mean, you got Eli White on the bench, who is really gunning for his spot. I mean, Eli White actually plays all three outfield positions. It plays them well. He's faster than Nick Solak. He is a better base runner, better defender at all those positions. He also plays the infield better than Nick Solak as well. I think his arm is a little bit better. He doesn't hit for as much power. He doesn't hit as well. But if he can figure out the hitting part, then he's going to take Nick Solak's roster spot, and the Rangers are going to be able to use that on somebody else. Because if Nick Solak is not hitting, and definitely not hitting, if he's not hitting against lefties, then he really doesn't have a whole lot of value for the Texas Rangers Baseball Club. Now, his splits against lefties have been a little bit better than what he has done against righties. Against lefties for his career, he has a 788 OPS, which isn't anything that's like crazy great. It's only 285 plate appearances, 130 games for his big league career. He does have a slugging percentage over 400, where against righties, he has an OPS in total of just under 600 plate appearances of 667. That's not great. His on base against lefties is 365. That's really great. Is the number you want against a guy who is just hitting against one-handedness of a pitcher. Ideally, the Rangers would have liked him to, stepped up by now, had an OPS around 750. If he had an OPS around at least at least above 700, maybe even around the 725 range. I don't think the Rangers would have made this move for Brad Miller. I think that he pretty much would have been the left fielder for the future. But he didn't. He hasn't stepped up. He has an OPS below 700 for the last 2 years. And that was his time to go ahead and show the Rangers what he could do. He slugged below 400 both those years and on base below 330. Like, that's just not going to do for a guy who needs to hit and needs to be an offensive first player. But anyway, this is a big season for him. His Rangers career and his Major League Baseball career is kind of hanging by a thread here because the Rangers aren't exactly big wallopers. It's not like their outfield is. It's not like they have a Corey Seager and a Marcus Semien blocking the out-level player, blocking the outfield positions. Like it's there for the taking, and there's not a whole lot of prospects on the horizon that are primary corner outfielders. But if he doesn't step up, then Josh Smith and Ezekiel Duran are going to take his spot, run with it, and the Rangers are not going to look back or think twice about cutting him loose. So this is a big year for him. But anyway, let's move on to Adoles Garcia. This is the hardest one. Honestly, this is just, I don't know what to expect from him. This is a guy who has prodigious power and a lot of real value in the outfield defensively. I think he really should have been. I think he was absolutely robbed by not being a Gold Glove finalist for either center field or right field. I think he was one of the 3 best defensive center fielders and right fielders in the game last year, but he spent too much time at different positions to qualify for either, which kind of sucks. And if it wasn't Leody Taveras that was going to be the one that's pushing him in center field, I think he would be pretty much locked in as the Rangers center fielder of the future. But anyway, he's got prodigious power, but he strikes out way too much. Nearly a third of his plate appearances last year, he was striking out. 31.2% strikeout rate and only a 5.1% walk rate. That is not great. His home run rate was just below his walk rate. He had a home run in 5% of his plate appearances and had a walk in 5.1% of his plate appearances. That's kind of insane. The guy was very valuable in every single defensive category you would want. He made some good jumps. He made some diving plays. He made some incredible reads on balls, including one that I don't know how he did it to this day. It felt like he got a jump on the ball before the batter even swung and absolutely robbed. You know what I'm talking about. The play down the first base line. It was just absolutely incredible. He reached over the dugout and just snagged a ball, and he's got an absolute cannon of an arm. By far the best of anyone on this Rangers team in the Rangers farm system. It might even be better than Joey Gallo's, and Joey Gallo's was pretty much an 80. Like, this guy's got an absolute cannon, and he fields it well. He picks up balls well. He made some incredible throws. Like, his defense was one of the only things to smile about towards the end of last year. But that's not enough. That's not enough to be an everyday starter. It's not enough to lock down a position. Even though he has probably 70 grade raw power, it's absolutely massive. The improvements at the plate have been noticeable this year. Not swinging at every single 3-2 pitch. He swung at the most 3-2 pitches last year in all of baseball, and he wasn't making a lot of contact. He was swinging and missing. He was swinging and missing at not good strikes or fouling off pitches. He was just swinging stuff way out of the zone. You get him to a full count, you could pretty much strike him out almost every time last year. It was just not great. But if he can have a little bit better plate discipline, he hit really well against fastballs and against sliders last year. And if those are the only 2 pitches that you're going to hit, if you can only pick 2, at this day and age, I think that's the 2 that you would choose. He struggled mightily against changeup. If he can recognize those off-speed pitches a little bit better and have his on base, it needs to be a bare minimum of 300. Like that's the bare minimum. Last year it was below that, I believe, at 285. But he needs to walk more. He just needs to not swing at pitches that are way, way out of the zone. Like that's really what he needs, because that raw power and that defense will carry you. He had a 286 on base percentage last year and a slugging percentage of 454. So an OPS of 741, which was just below, I believe, Nathaniel Lowe for second on the team last year. The guy was electric. The Rangers love having him around. He's very versatile defensively in the outfield. He provides a lot of value at every single position. Long term, he might end up being the Rangers right fielder for the next 3-4 years if Leody can come up and show anywhere near the offensive potential that he showed in AAA last year. But this is a big year for him. Hoping for at least 20 home runs. He's going to start every single day, whether it's in center or in right. I think even if Leody comes up, if you're thinking about a platoon with him and Kole Calhoun in right field, no, don't think about it. He's just straight up better than Kole Calhoun. Offensively, I think he's going to bring a lot more to the plate, even with his crazy strikeout rate, which I think will improve this year. I mean, he is a little older. He was a little older as a rookie last year at 28, but he's still got some ways to go. I think the Rangers hitting staff is going to make a huge difference in him. And if they do, then that is a super, super valuable player they got out of absolutely nowhere, and some really, really good fortune for the Texas Rangers. Now, let's look at Kole Calhoun, which Adoles was really tough to do. Kole Calhoun might have been even more difficult to figure out a baseline of what is good. What is a good season for Kole Calhoun look like? Not just because he had a really down year last year and he had a career year the year before in a shortened season, an A64 OPS, which was by far the best in his career. Only one other year was a year that he had an OPS over 800, and that was 58 games as a rookie in 2013, which was a long, long time ago. But he's been really up and down. In 2019, he had a really great year for Los Angeles. In his last year there, he had 33 home runs, which was by far a career high. But the year before, he had an OPS of 650. And before that, he had an OPS of 725. And then he had spikes basically every year between like 775 and 725. His OPS spiking about 50 points every year. But the Rangers are basically penciling it. They're pretty much writing it in pen at this point. There's a thought that he might be platooning in left field if the Rangers went and got a Michael Conforto or a Seiya Suzuki. But with Brad Miller in, it looks like, yeah, right field is his position to play. He won a Gold Glove many, many years ago, back in 2015. That was 7 years ago. So it's been a minute. He's going to be 34 this year. He has a 2-year deal, but the second year is a team option. I don't think there's any buyout on there, making $5.2 million this year. So that's about starter money, which is a little bit less than Brad Miller's making to be platoon money. But again, Kole Calhoun, even though he is old, I think his defense is going to be a little bit better in right field, and he has a little bit better of an arm than Brad Miller. I don't think he hits lefties hits righties nearly as well as him, but that's fine. Last year was a really not great year for him, a 670 OPS in 51 games. The Rangers are really hoping for some health. He had some health issues last year. But before that, with the Angels, he played 120 plus games every single year from 2014 all the way to 2019, and 130 plus every year after 2014. Like, the guy was very healthy, very consistent. The Rangers need a veteran presence in the clubhouse, and having a 34-year-old who has said on, I believe, Mondays, Tuesday, whatever day the Rangers played several days ago, when he was talking with Emily Jones about him not being afraid to be a vocal leader. The Rangers need that. Marcus Semien is probably more of it seems like he's more of a quiet leader. He can step up when he needs to. And Corey Seager seems like that as well. Having Kole Calhoun, who's been around a long time, who will be, I believe, the oldest position player in the clubhouse. Actually, Charlie Culberson might be a little bit older than him. But still, having that guy who is a starter every day, that makes a difference, as opposed to having it be a Charlie Culberson who might be a little older, might have been around a little bit longer, but it's going to be pretty much a bench role. It makes a lot of difference. So that's what I'm projecting with him. I realize I haven't even said that. I'm hoping about minimum 130 games and a 750-ish OPS. I think that would be a successful season for him. I'm hoping for 20 plus homers. That's not a bare minimum thing. I think his bare minimum for OPS needs to be about 750, because the Rangers are paying him to be that veteran, to be a starter, and that's about the bare minimum. I mean, if it's below 725, then the Rangers are really looking at some of those minor league guys in Josh Smith or maybe even Ezekiel Duran to come up and replace him, because that won't be good enough for what the Rangers are hoping to have this year. The pitching staff is going to be fine to mediocre, but they need this offense, even the people towards the bottom third of this lineup, to be good. So I'm hoping for 20 plus homers and on base above 320. I think he can do that. If he can have an OPS of 775 or better, be great. I think he's going to be about a 1 to 1.5 WAR player, and that's fine. That's about what the Rangers are signing him to be. He's making, like I said, $5.2 million this year, a just straight team option next year. Would have liked for him to just be a 1-year deal and be the starting left fielder. That's initially what I thought when the Rangers signed him, and that the Rangers would go get Seiya Suzuki to play right field for the next several years, but that's not happening. And, that's fine. I think if he performs, like I said, if he hits 20 plus homers, has an on base above 320 and OPS above 775, then I think the Rangers will pick up that option and keep him on the team next year. But it kind of depends on how some other guys do, how Leote is doing. Because if Leote looks like he's big league ready, then the Rangers aren't going to pick up that option, and it's going to be Adoles Garcia in right field, and Kole Calhoun will go somewhere else, because the Rangers guaranteed Brad Miller 2 years, but not Kole Calhoun. It seems a little little counterintuitive, but again, Kole Calhoun is a little bit older, so having him, if he is fine at 34, then he might not be as fine at 35, and he might not even be fine this year because last year was a bit of a train wreck for him. But the Rangers are banking on him being okay. Eli White, I don't know what I'm expecting from him. I think he's going to make the roster. I think he's probably going to play in around 50 to 60-ish games. I don't know. If he has an OPS above 650, I think that the Rangers are seriously considering cutting bait with Nick Solak after this season. But he provides a lot of value and he's healthy. His swing looks better. I don't know. There is a scenario in which he kind of takes over Nick Solak's role at some point this season if Nick Solak doesn't perform. But I'm hoping that Eli White can stay healthy because I didn't get the fascination last year with him, but I'm starting to get it now, and I'm really liking what I'm seeing from him in spring training, and I think that he's going to be a decently important part of this Rangers team with that crazy level of versatility and defensive value he provides in the outfield, and also his freaky fastness. It'd be really nice to see him have a breakout season, and if Nick Solak can't get his act together, then take that role and just mash against lefties. But anyway, those are my expectations. I'm hoping that I left Leote off, but just quickly on Leote, he's going to start the season in AAA. I'm really hoping that by July or August, he looks ready for another crack at the big leagues, and that if he does get a crack, that he gets some good luck. Because last year, he did look bad. He did look overmatched quite a bit, but he also had quite a bit of bad luck. Like, it wasn't just that he was absolutely crazy overmatched, because he looked solid in 2020. Look, like if he can have that level of a 300 plus on base percentage and an OPS above 700, that's a quality 2-3 win player in center field with his defense. So I'm hoping that he gets a shot in the big leagues this year and that he's ready for it, and that whatever he was doing offensively last year, he can get out of it, and this Rangers offensive hitting staff can kind of turn his season and maybe even his big league career around. But those are my expectations for this Rangers offense. It's not going to be anything flashy. It's not going to be nearly as fun. Probably. Actually, Adoles Garcia is pretty fun. But the rest of them are not going to be nearly as fun as the Rangers infield is hopefully going to be this season. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every day. On tomorrow's show, I'm going to be doing my final opening day roster projection version 2.0. Yeah, I only did 2. Some people did 3. Sue me. It's probably not going to be that different from what I did last week, but there is one guy who has been optioned to the minor leagues. I might have some different thoughts on where guys slot in the rotation, what the batting order looks like, but that'll be on tomorrow's show. But go make your second listen Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully. He brings you his unique perspective on the major leagues, both past and present. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. So tomorrow, breaking down my final roster projections. Next week, I'll have a crossover episode, I believe on Tuesday, with at least as many as we can get of the AL West Locked On hosts. It's going to be a lot of fun. Going to do some full previews for the Rangers season next year, some burning questions, a lot of fun in the episodes next week. And next week, we get baseball. As of today, we are 8 days away from, 7 days away from the Major League Baseball season starting, and 8 days away from the Texas Rangers baseball season starting. So much exciting stuff. Also, want to thank you guys for making March. This is now officially my biggest month ever in Locked On Rangers history. Somehow past December for most listens, even though the Rangers didn't spend $500 million in March. They just ended, I guess they didn't end the lockout, but they helped in the lockout, whatever part they did, and baseball came back, and y'all are just excited as I am for this Rangers season. Going to be a lot of fun. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.